Hey guys, what's up? Today I'll be testing a very complete, a very feature-packed digital audio player that is neither too big nor too heavy, so you can carry it on long trips if you want. It's neither too expensive, so you can save a kidney in case you want one. It's called Shanling M3X, that goes for 340 bucks. So as you can see, it's really small, it's portable, and it has some interesting specs which I'll mention in a minute. So what are we waiting for? Let's check it out. Design-wise, M3X looks exactly like a miniature version of Shanling M8 that I've crowned as the best looking DAP that I've put my hands on. It's the same, just smaller, much lighter, with just a single change. Instead of an interchangeable headphone socket, they put two headphone jacks on the M3X, more exactly a regular 3.5mm socket and a balanced 4.4mm one. It rocks only 3 buttons and a single volume wheel that can work as an on-off button. I mean, it can be much simpler than this. You have your play, pause, next and previous buttons, 2 headphone jacks, a volume wheel, and that's it. It's machined from a single block of aluminum with 2 glass sheets on its front and back. Its learning curve takes exactly 1 minute, and I wish some other DAPs would offer the same exceptional user experience. M3X uses a somewhat smaller 4.2-inch IPS panel. It's a decent HD screen, I find it quite bright, with good viewing angles and with just a decent contrast ratio. Don't expect a smartphone-like contrast and very vibrant colors. It's decent for what it is, but it will not challenge modern smartphones anytime soon. On the plus side, its unusual 3:2 aspect ratio makes it a lot more comfortable to hold and a lot more pocketable. As for the tech inside it, it rocks a Snapdragon 430 that is also powering their high-end DAPs like M8 and M30. While it might sound like an entry to mid-level CPU by today's standards, for a DAP that is one of the fastest and reliable CPUs. It supports Google Play Store, from which you can install any app you could possibly desire, including games, streaming apps, YouTube, anything really. At the heart of M3X are staying 2 of the newest generation ES9219 DAC chips. And the most interesting aspect about this silicon is that besides decoding zeros and ones, it also amplifies the analog signal by incorporating a dedicated headphone amplifier circuit. This way they achieved the shortest signal path, as no additional circuitry is needed to drive your headphones. Since Shanling used 2 DAC chips in a dual mono configuration, the wall circuitry is fully balanced, offering up to 240 mW on the 4.4 jack and up to 100 mW on its regular jack. It rocks a full MQA decoder, an improved FPGA, 2 crystal oscillators, it supports 2.4 and 5 GHz Wi-Fi bands, and all those fancy Bluetooth codecs as aptX HD and LDAC. Pretty cool specs, right? But let's check how it actually performs. The DAP business isn't something new to Shanling. I think that they are still one of the very few pioneers of the post-iPod era, and it really shows while testing it, while playing, while listening to it. I think that the overall experience feels quite polished, especially on the firmware 1.3, and in my opinion the overall experience and sound performance is on quite high level. I think that it sounds quite holographic, quite airy sounding, especially on its balanced output. While listening to some older music that has this extreme stereo effect, everything sounded just very decompressed, so increasing the void spaces between each and every musical note. It never actually sounded close and personal, upfront, congested. That never happened, as it usually happens with some entry-level to mid-level portable DAPs. It's an extremely fast and highly resolving unit, so it can easily unearth a higher amount of detail from your music, while sounding quite snappy and engaging all the time. The bass output is also quite impressive. I think that it was undistorted all the time, very clean sounding, and going to the deepest pitch, easily reaching those 20 Hz notes. The most important aspect is that it's dual DAC configuration, more importantly dual ESS Sabre DAC configuration, didn't appear as bright or teeth clenching to me. I was on purpose using some brighter IEMs and some brighter desktop headphones, and if brightness didn't make an appearance in my music, I think that all my fears are now dust in the air. In all honesty, I'm yet to experience a bright sounding DAP from the house on Shanling. Even their own Q1 ESS equipped DAP also sounded quite warm, quite smooth, having just a heavier tonality. I just guess that their custom FPGA coding is doing some kind of mumbo jumbo, improving the warmth, adding some soul into the music and improving the end result somehow. The only thing that might not appeal to anyone is its reference tuning that will impress with its technicalities and less so with its musicality. As for the Soundstage, it's really simple. So if you want the nicest depth, if you want the widest Soundstage, if you want the biggest sound ever, just use its balanced configuration that has a much better channel separation of 115 dB versus just 75 on its regular headphone jack. Maybe on some other DAPs the difference between these two jacks is not that big, but on this one is quite big, believe me. So while listening to Deep Purple, Child in Time on its balanced output, the vocal performance just increased in size, like the singer had some healthier and bigger lungs. The treble performance also took a few steps backwards, like I have upgraded from semi-open headphones to fully open back headphones. And if you don't have a balanced cable yet, just use its dual DAC configuration, don't use its single DAC configuration until you get a balanced cable, so that is my biggest recommendation to you. Even so, M3X didn't remind me about my desktop setup, how their M8 would do. If I would close my eyes, I would feel that I'm listening to a portable device, because the sounds at some point would hit some kind of imaginary wall, and the sounds weren't really flying into the abyss. And I think I'm okay with that, considering its price point and its size. Nonetheless, I was expecting this, and I'm okay with this, because M3X still has a nice layering, a decent amount of air is always traveling around, and I've never experienced clutter or muddiness. Moving on to transit response, in my opinion, this is where the little M3X is really impressive compared to some other entry to mid-level DAPs. Even their own Shanling Q1 isn't that impressive in this department, always choosing a relaxing, easygoing, having just a slower pace. Compared to that one, M3X really feels like an Italian sports car, always going super fast, always sounded super snappy. If on Q1 the drummers would be just much gentler with their kits, the bass players would be not slapping their guitars. On M3X it's the other way around, so the drummers would be much more aggressive. The bass players would slam those strings like they stole it. Surprisingly, even several desktop headphones sounded really alive, really snappy, really engaging with this one. The biggest standouts for me were Kennerton Wodan, RZH Phobos, and even Halfaman HE1000 SE sounded really nice with this one, having a pretty good headroom left on top actually. I don't really think Shanling made their little DAP so resilient and so courageous with desktop headphones in their minds, but hey, it works and it sounds pretty sweet with them. As for detail retrieval, here is the thing. So a dual DAC configuration, more exactly a dual ESS Sabre DAC configuration, without any kind of op-amps in the signal path, without any kind of current to voltage conversion stage, can mean only one thing, and that is a detailed, transparent, clean and undistorted type of sound. So connected some of the cleanest, some of the most detailed headphones that I have around, I was able to spot all those tiny details, micro details, call them as you want, pretty easily. There isn't any kind of rise or drop in the frequency response. I think that it sounds quite honest, and that really helped me find all those tiny details without too much difficulty in a way. So I didn't need to engage my Sherlock Holmes skills, because all those tiny details came towards me without any kind of intervention from my part. So I've already tested several devices with ES9218 DAC, a little bit older than the one inside this one. like Shanling Q1, like FIO M3 Pro, BTR 5, and while all those were quite resolving, quite detailed sounding, I think that M3X is just on another level altogether. And that was felt without doing any kind of blind test, because it was so damn obvious from the start. Its noise rejection is nothing short of spectacular. So it has a noise floor of 1.8 microvolts on its regular jack and 2.4 microvolts on its balanced output. As a point of comparison, a much higher priced Shanling M8 has it at just a little bit lower, just by a hair lower compared to the M3X, and FIO M15, which is also a very high-end DAP, has it much higher noise floor compared to M3X, almost double noise actually compared to this one. The best measuring desktop headphone amplifier has it at 1.9 microvolts. I'm owning that amplifier, and anything really, any sensitive IEMs, portable headphones, desktop headphones, sounded really dead silent with that amplifier. And the same can be said about the Shanling M3X. So be them ultra sensitive IEMs, be them FA9, FH7, you name it, Hebe Crystal 6, so on and so forth. All that sounded really dead silent without any kind of noise, just you and the music, and that was all. In the past, such kind of noiseless performance was reserved only for upper-class portable DAPs, but I'm very happy to experience the same cleanness and a lack of noise at an affordable price point. As for power output, it offers a max power of 240 milliwatts on its balanced out and some 100 milliwatts on its regular jack. And while that doesn't seem that much, I think that it has plenty of power to drive even desktop class dynamic and planar mounted headphones. So I think that it's quite a powerful little devil in my opinion. So with sensitive IEMs, I was at about 30 to 35 out of 100 on its balanced out and high gain, and on the low gain about on the 50 out of 100. That was already way too loud. So of course it was fully driving those IEMs. Portable headphones stood at about 55, so of course it has plenty of power for anything really. Desktop headphones, desktop dynamic headphones like Kenerton Valley, Kenerton Galarhorn, Kenerton Magni, Rezetich Mania, at around 70 out of 100 also sounded very snappy, very engaging, really powerful. A lot of volume left on tap, so of course the headroom felt really almost limitless. The most interesting aspect is that it could even drive some planar magnetic headphones like Quad Era 1, like Kenerton Wodan, like Rezetich Phobos, at around 75 to maybe to 80 out of 100, so that was very impressive. Even HiFiMan HE1000 SE were driven really nicely, I think, with this device. I really didn't expect such a nice control of the drivers, even with planar magnetic headphones. Dynamics weren't really shy, even with headphones of such caliber. The low end didn't lower its intensity, and M3X was still running crazy like Forrest Gump, never losing a single bit. Moving on to frequency response, I think that it has a pretty nice, pretty amazing actually sub-bass performance. Its sub-bass will easily reach those 20 Hz notes with the right headphones, of course. It will decay all that air mass really gradually, really slowly, like it has a nicer capacitance inside. The bass notes themselves felt really weighty, punchy, hard slamming, nicely layered, clean, undistorted, exactly how a high quality type of bass should be delivered at all times. Snare drum hits had that raw energy that is really hard to describe by words. And be it sub-bass or mid-bass, it just added a little bit more warmth, the right presence and density, while nicely controlling that air mass, keeping at bay all those nasty distortions. On one hand, its mid-range performance is nowhere as impressive, as sweet, as warm, as soul-grabbing as it happens on the M8 DAP, but I think it's not plasticky sounding at all, not boring, lifeless, or thin sounding at all. I think that it has the right dose of naturalness. It's mostly linear and neutral sounding for the most part. You just need to use the right headphone. The most used headphone for this review was Kennerton Wodan, that pushed the mid-range a little bit on the foreground, and that helped this one quite a lot, highlighting their beautiful texture while improving its mid-range delivery. Its treble performance feels complete from the lowest to the highest treble peaks. I think there is plenty of driver movement even past top octave. And if you are searching for some detailed double drums, for some clean sounding cymbals, I think that you came to the right party because it has all that. While there is plenty of presence in the highest registers, I find it clean, detailed, but never harsh or bright sounding, even with treble intensive music. Okay guys, as for my conclusions, I don't like recommending stuff that doesn't deserve your attention, but while playing with this one in a span of 2 weeks, it felt like searching for cones like a needle in a haystack. Sure, it doesn't have the warmest mid-range, it doesn't have the biggest and the widest soundstage, it doesn't have the most powerful headphone output, but everything else felt on a very high level. It has gobs of technicalities while sounding super impressive with very sensitive IEMs. It's cute and small on the outside, but its feature set is on par with the biggest and the best DAPs out there. There isn't a feature that M3X doesn't have, and that is precisely why it felt complete from the get-go. It will cost you $339 and I think that it fully deserves your attention. Okay guys, my full in-depth review can be found on my website. In case you want to support the channel, please subscribe to it, and as usual, listen to my music. Be positive and I'll see you next time. Cheers! Bye bye!